Welcome to Let's Talk Kenmore, a lighthearted podcast aimed at connecting our citizens to the city of Kenmore and demystifying the role of city government. I am your host, Amber Clifton. On this episode, our traffic engineer, Tobin, educates me, and hopefully you, on setting speed limits in Kenmore. Please enjoy this installment of Let's Talk Kenmore. I am here today with our traffic engineer, Tobin Bennett Gold, and he is going to educate me and you about setting speed limits. Hi, Tobin. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you, Amber.
What can you tell us about speed limits and how they're set?
Right. So one of the interesting things about speed limits is it's very easy to fixate on them, but speed limits aren't actually the end-all be-all of what we care about. Our real goal is travel speeds. So when we change the number on a speed limit sign, just change those black and white numbers, that doesn't do a whole lot to change how fast people are driving. So we do get a lot of requests. Please reduce the speed limit on this road. Please raise the speed limit on that road. Please, change all the speed limits in the city to 20 miles per hour. But just making that change on the sign does not really have a huge impact on the speeds people are driving and doesn't have a huge impact on how safe we are when we're using our roads. So one of the things that we're really looking to do is trying to change the travel speeds, and speed limits are just a small part of our toolbox for doing that.
So why is it that doesn't influence the travel speed, the speed limit signs? Is it just because they're used to traveling that road? Is it people that are local to that area, or what's the reason behind that?
Yeah, some of it's going to be what you're used to. A lot of it's going to be that people, they'll drive at the fastest speed that they're comfortable driving. So if the road's narrow, if it's bumpy, if there's things popping out of driveways, if there's speed humps, all those things might make you want to drive slower. If the lane is 14 feet wide, if you can see 5,000 feet down the street in front of you, if you don't have anything that's making you turn or slow down or stop, then people are going to naturally want to speed up to freeway speeds,
Gotcha.
So it's really what that speed limit speaks to is just a small part of what makes us comfortable at a given driving speed. So a speed limit might slow you down a little bit if you have if you're concerned about the threat of enforcement. If you think cops are coming up ahead, then exceeding the speed limit might make you very uncomfortable, and in that case, pairing enforcement with the speed limit might help us see reduced travel speeds. But we don't always have enforcement everywhere throughout the city on all of our roads, so that's not something that we can rely upon the speed limit combined with the threat of enforcement to really change the travel speeds. We do see some speed reduction because sometimes people are looking for a cue. Sometimes people, they want to follow the rules, take that cue. So we do see a little bit of a reduction when we reduce the speed limit. We see speeds follow that a little bit, just not a lot of it.
Gotcha.
So what we're trying here in Kenmore, and this is something that is really getting traction regionally and a little bit nationally, but really regionally, it's something that is really changing about how we're looking at speed limits and how we're looking about changing travel speeds on roads, is looking at how people get all these context cues from the streets and all these things that make us uncomfortable to drive too fast, and looking at those in addition to speed limits as ways to try to get our travel speeds where we want them to be. So we will look at things like when we want to reduce the travel speeds on our roads from speeds that are appropriate for a 30 mile per hour speed limit to speeds that are appropriate for a 25 mile per hour speed limit. We'll change that speed limit sign, but at the same time, we'll want to change a lot of other things about the roads. We'll want to make the lanes narrower. We'll want to add some, roadside devices or furniture, things that maybe make it feel a little bit more cramped and not so wide open and inviting for speeding. We might look at changing, how much you're able to just drive in a straight line, or maybe we'll want to, put in some features like speed humps or chicanes, things that make you have to engage with the road and feel less comfortable driving fast. We want to change all those things at the same time we change that speed limit.
Sorry, real quick. What's a chicane?
Oh, a chicane.
A chicane. What's that?
Yeah, chicane. Yeah, so it's a feature that we'll put in the road, and they come in a lot of different shapes. But there'll be, for example, little bump outs in the road, so that you might have to steer a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. If it's mild chicanes, if they're very aggressive chicanes, then it might take up so much space in the road that each direction can only pass at one time. So you might see someone coming towards you and want to slow down so that they can pass through the chicane towards you before you pass through it again. That might come in the form of chicanes if they're offset from one another, or we might call them pinch points if those bump outs are on both sides of the road right next to each other. But things to make it difficult just to go on to autopilot.
Gotcha.
Because when we force people to engage in the driving environment, that's something that also makes it uncomfortable to drive fast. So yeah, chicanes are a form of what we call horizontal deflection. So we have vertical deflection, like speed humps. It's very uncomfortable to go fast when you're going over some sort of vertical deflection. Speed humps, speed tables, speed cushions, things that are some sort of bump or hump or other sort of up and down device that's uncomfortable to navigate at high speeds. And then we also have chicanes that are a type of horizontal deflections, things that make you go left or right, or things that make you take a sharp turn instead of a wide turn. Those are all things in our toolbox for helping create an environment where the comfortable speed is something that's consistent with the speed limit.
Gotcha.
So, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for trying to get a match between the speed limit and the speed of comfort that people naturally choose to drive. And what's really great for us then is our speed limit signs, they start to be worth more. They're more trustworthy, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're driving through some state highway where it feels very comfortable to go 50 miles per hour, for example, but you see a speed limit sign that says 25, we're going to have very low compliance with that speed limit sign because it just feels silly to go 25 when you've got 3 lanes in each direction and all the lanes are 14 feet wide and you can see off a mile ahead of you. Right. So when we do a better job making the traffic environment match the speed limit, then you get some synergy there and people trust the signs more. You see a 25 mile per hour speed limit and you expect to encounter an environment that you're comfortable driving at 25. Or you enter a 25 mile per hour environment and then you see that 25 mile per hour speed limit and you're like, oh yeah, that speed limit's a good idea. So you get more trust between signs as communication devices with the drivers.
That makes sense.
That's something that we're aiming to do in Kenmore. It's something we've been working on for a couple of years now. We did a study a few years ago looking at all of our travel speeds on our arterial and our collector roads. So our arterial roads being the ones that you mainly get on the arterial road to move a lot of cars a long distance pretty quickly. Our collector roads being the roads that you leave your neighborhood and you get on a road that's going to take you to an arterial road. So in Kenmore, our collector roads might be like 192nd Street, 155th Street, for example. Our arterial roads are going to be like Juanita Drive, Simons, 80th, 61st. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, 522 is a WashDOT arterial on the regional scale.
And does WashDOT determine the speed limit on 522?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We're kind of partners with WashDOT on what happens in 522. They are the owners, operators of the road, but we have agreements in place to look at how this road's working and look at what can make it safer, what can make it operate better. So we did recently lower the speed limit on 522. We lowered it from 40 to 35 just a couple months ago, and we did that in partnership with WashDOT. So it's something that we wanted to do, and the first step, whether it's our road or WashDOT's road, would be doing a speed study to find out how fast people are going already on it, to see what would be an appropriate speed limit for that road, or what do we need to change about how people are driving before we can do a lower speed limit. So we talked with WashDOT, and WashDOT was on board with wanting 522 to be a 35 mile per hour speed limit road, and we wanted to make sure that we had travel speeds on 522 that were consistent with a 35 mile per hour speed limit. A lot of the time, that would mean doing a speed study, finding out people are going faster than the new speed limit that we want, and then finding out what changes we need to make at the same time we change the speed limit. But with 522, and it was surprising for us and WashDOT, but we did that speed study on 522, and we found that people were already traveling at speeds consistent with the 35 mile per hour speed limit. So it was ready to change the signs out without any further changes.
Gotcha. That was going to be my next question, because there wasn't a need in that case to add these other deterrents that you spoke about earlier to kind of encourage people to slow down. It was already there.
Yeah. So that said, with the nature of a state route and how it's built, a lot of that downward pressure on speed does come from congestion and signal progression. Like it's physics. You can't go faster than the car in front of you.
Right.
Right.
Correct. Right. Well, you could try, but that's an accident, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. Most people don't choose to, but yeah. So those speeds that are consistent with a 35 mile per hour speed limit, we see those during the day. But when the road is empty for one reason or another, we do see speeds that are higher. But we're not making those choices about how to sign the speed limit for 522 based on what people are doing at 3 a.m.
Right.
That it would be irresponsible to sign the road for speeds that we only really see during the wee hours of the morning, when in fact we're carrying 90% of the volume on 522 during just a 9-hour period.
Correct. So what sort of like data collection, or what goes into place when you first determine that a road needs to be looked at and possibly has a speed issue, and you need to do some speed setting mechanisms?
Right. So there's that can be broken into two things. One would be when we want to change the speed limit because there is a target speed that would be appropriate for that kind of road. Like we may want lower speeds because of the kind of traffic it carries. Maybe it carries a lot of bicycles. Maybe it has a lot of pedestrian activity, that sort of thing. Then we'll look at the process of what will it take to get from the current speed limit to the lower speed limit. And then the other process, and there's some overlap here, is what do we do when we have travel speeds that are not appropriate for the speed limits that's already there. So to take Juanita Drive as an example for this, when we did the Walkways and Waterways project, we knew we were going to put a lot more bicycles on that road. We knew we were going to, make it a lot more attractive to use the pedestrian facilities on that road. We were going to bring a lot of these vulnerable road users into that environment, and we decided that what we need in order to do the best we could for keeping everyone safe is that we would need to also slow traffic down and reduce the speed limit. So that environment with the slower speed was a match for the lower speed limit that we were putting in at the end of the project. So we did, during the project, we put in a lot of features that make it uncomfortable to drive faster. So the lanes are narrower now than they used to be. Mm-hmm. The bike lanes slim the travel space down for cars a little bit, and we're going to be putting in later on some more features to improve the separation between the travel lanes and the bike lanes, like vertical delineators, the vertical flexible sticks that you see some places with the reflectors on. Those make the existing lane width just feel a little bit more cramped. We have at the transit islands, which is where we have the greatest degree of complexity in our traffic environment, with buses stopping and starting, with people crossing the road. There we have those big center islands that again put the squeeze on the travel lanes. And even when you have the same lane width, it feels a lot smaller when you have curbs at the edge of your lane than when you just have painted lines at the edge of your lane. So without reducing the lane width at our transit stops, putting in those center islands allowed us to have curbs on both sides, which makes the lane feel even narrower. And so we do see our slowest speeds at the transit islands, and we see our slowest speeds, near intersections where we've put in, sections of curbing on the center line and through the curves and stuff like that. So these are changes that we made in order to try to change the speed limit and the travel speeds at the same time. So that said, we were really optimistic with how much we could reduce travel speeds. And there's a few places on Juanita where doing speed studies now, we're still seeing that speeds are too high to be appropriate with that 30 mile per hour speed limit. So that kind of feeds into the same kinds of programs that we have elsewhere in the city where we have speeds that are too high for the posted speed limit. Whether it's the posted speed limit that we've had for decades or if it's the speed limit that we just posted recently, we look at how fast people are traveling, and we are going to try to identify what we can do to reduce the travel speeds there. And that goes back into a lot of the traffic calming and speed management techniques that we were talking about. Things like, speed humps, vertical deflection that I was talking about. Those are something that you might want to use on lower speed roads. For our higher speed roads where we want to allow people to drive 30 or 35. Mm-hmm. We're not necessarily going to want to put speed humps on 522, for example.
No, right?
Yeah. So we need to lean more on those other tools, the narrowing the lanes, the making the environment just feel a little bit closer to your car, so it doesn't feel as quite as open. Mm-hmm. And that's the low hanging fruit. But sometimes we have these streets where it's a tough nut to crack. Simons is a street where we have a lot of trouble slowing cars down, and it's going to take some more persuasive changes to the road to get people to feel uncomfortable driving too fast. Because parts of Simons are very straight. Some parts of Simons are downhill. Some of them are straight and downhill. Going into Kirkland, for example, or up there near the between the high school and going north of there before when the downhill curvy part of the hill starts. So we have a lot of places where it's very comfortable to have high speeds there, and that's a more difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, when you have a road like Simons, do you collaborate at all with Kirkland, or would any sort of mechanism just end at the Kenmore border?
Well, it's happened both ways in the past,
Mm-hmm.
So an example of this is when we did our Simons Road project a few years ago. I think it was 2020 or 2019, I forget. But we overlaid it. We added the bike lanes to the rest of Simons. Simons, south of the high school, south of 155th, used to be 2 lanes. We brought it down to 1 lane. And it's still 2 lanes down in Kirkland, where it hits, 100th Avenue, is kind of where Simons starts down there. And it's still 2 lanes there. And it probably ought to be 2 lanes still, because they have to receive cars in a certain way from that 100th Avenue that makes 2 lanes very advantageous to have in how that intersection operates. But at some point between where you're receiving 2 lanes of cars and where you get into Kenmore, you have to drop the lane. Mm-hmm. You have to somehow bring it down to 2 lanes to 1 lane. And when that project was originally done, we did the lane drop in Kenmore. We looked at coordinating with Kirkland to do the lane drop in Kirkland, but for a variety of reasons, it wasn't working out to extend that project past Kenmore city limits, so we did the lane drop in Kenmore.
Gotcha.
But then, looking at how it worked doing the lane drop in Kenmore, both Kirkland and Kenmore agreed that it would be preferable for both cities to have that lane drop happen in Kirkland. So we did do a second, mini project to shift that lane drop south. And what we did is we installed a really long trap lane. Trap lane meaning, and no one likes to install a trap lane, but sometimes it's all you can do. But one of those lanes where you're going forward and then all of a sudden you find out you're in a left turn lane. So,
Oh.
but that's why we made it so long, because we wanted to give lots of opportunity for people to merge in and out of that lane. And making it so long is something we were only able to do because we were bringing it down into, Kirkland, right? So in that place, people have a very long, lots of notice trap lane that the inside travel lane is turning into a left turn lane, and then that left turn lane delivers people onto 92nd Avenue, which then of course turns into 145th Street.
Yep, I know exactly where you mean. Is it also called a trap lane if your lane is ending and you have to kind of merge over?
I would call that just a lane drop.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say a trap lane is when you when through taking no action you end up in the wrong lane.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Or just continuing straight is not the choice that will put you in the right lane.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. I'm learning so much today. Okay. So how about the, the flashing signs that I call them the signs that yell at you to say slow down?
Oh, yeah.
Are
yeah,
those,
I know those.
how effective are those? And are those just temporary, or what's the purpose of those?
Yeah, no, one of our contractors told me that he always reads that slow down message in my voice. But
Is that a compliment?
I guess it depends how fast he's driving. But those are speed feedback signs, is what we call them, and they are permanent. Although we do have a couple of temporary speed feedback signs that we can put up and take down as we like. But I think we have maybe like 20 in the city. We've really installed a lot of them in the past 5 years, because they're not quite low hanging fruit, because they can be a little bit expensive, but they're medium height fruit, I guess, for slowing down speeds on arterials, and that's to combat the kind of speeding that just comes from inattention.
Gotcha.
Like maybe you never meant to speed, but here you are rolling downhill without your foot on the brake, right? So we do try to put those. They are more effective in some situations than others. My absolute favorite speed feedback sign in the city is one for northbound Simons Road, where you just start to head down that curve. So it's sticking there out of the ground right at, I think, 169th Street is about where it's located. And I think that's our most effective speed feedback sign in the city. I took a video for council a few years ago of just people slowing down as they approach that sign. It's really, I could stand there for hours. But so that one's really effective for two reasons. Number one, because you only have one lane going northbound right there. So again, one car is going to slow down every car behind them. So if we have a line of 100 cars, we only need to slow down one of them, and then everyone is going as fast as the car in front of them. So on those roads without opportunities to pass, our speed reduction techniques are a lot more effective, because being effective on one driver is essentially that driver making the decision for the rest of the corridor that is caught up to them. So really a good opportunity whenever when it's difficult to pass, to put effective speed measures there. The other reason that sign is effective is because it's at the bottom of this straight downhill section, and right before you start to go through these S curves. So when you're going through those S curves, accelerating is uncomfortable. So you have people, you get them to put their foot on the brake to slow down for the sign, and then they're just kind of maintaining their speed as they go through those curves. So putting these speed feedback signs in front of complicated traffic environments, either it's complicated geometry, curves and hills and such, or it's complicated because there's things like street parking going on, or lots of crossings, that sort of thing. If we can get them to reduce their speed as they enter one of these more complicated environments, they're more likely to maintain that speed as they go through it. Whereas if they entered that environment going 45, they might maintain 45 instead of maintaining 35. So that's a really well-placed speed feedback sign, and it's older than my tenure at the city, so we have our ancestor traffic engineers to thank for that one.
Gotcha. Anything else you would like the public to know about setting speed limits?
Oh, what else about setting speed limits? It takes a long time to make these changes. Even just striping is something that requires, warm, dry weather. So that's a relatively short time of the year and a lot of work to get it done in. So we have so much work that we're doing in Kenmore, and it's hard to get to it all quickly. And we're trying to do the most important work that gives us the most safety first. But it does mean that we have a lot of places in Kenmore where we'd really like to do better, but we're limited by our time, our resources, the seasons, uh, supply chain disruptions. Still linger. So it's one engineering problem to figure out what needs to be done. It's an entirely different engineering problem to figure out what order to do it in, and how to get it done the most quickly. So I know we get lots of concerns that come to City Hall about travel speeds all over Kenmore. We take them all seriously. We look at all this stuff. We're very proactive about monitoring travel speeds throughout the city. If you call and you let me know people are speeding on this road or that road, chances are we've actually done a speed study near there recently and we're aware of the problem. We just haven't gotten to it yet because there's so much to do, and it took 100 years to build the traffic environment we're in now, and there's a lot of it that by current standards we'd like to fix, and I don't think it'll take us 100 years to rebuild it, but it will take us a while.
Yeah.
And so we're doing the best we can with the constraints that we have on how quickly we can do and how much we can do.
Yeah, understood. Well, thank you so much for educating me today. This has been really interesting.
Oh, good. I don't get that often.
It was very interesting. I appreciate you, and thank you so much for looking out for Kenmore's safety.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a job that's important to me, and I'm really happy for the opportunity to do it.
Well, thank you, Tobin. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Let's Talk Kenmore. Be sure to check back for more interesting topics and conversations. And as always, don't forget to ask yourself, where's the fun?